Gracie is the log line, or the tagline, if you like, is Gracie's 29 and she walks onto Waterloo Bridge. It's 2 a.m. and she's in the depth of despair. You can tell this is a girl who is, she's very much on her last legs. But anyway, at the last moment, she sort of stands back from, oh my God, I can't even throw myself in the water. I can't even end it all. Now what do I do? She's at that point where, what do? You don't want to live anymore, but you can't die. So at that moment, a 17-year-old girl runs onto the bridge and she's desperate. Someone's chasing her. She's desperate to escape and she's desperately clinging on to life. Crashes into Gracie, begs for her help. And Gracie's sort of shocked out of her misery and she's shocked out of her unhappiness. And she takes pity on this young girl and the pair of them run off into the night. But what actually happens is it throws them into this strange overnight world where lots of things happen, some scary, some just downright odd. And come morning, it will have changed them both forevermore if they survive the night. When you're really unhappy when you're a kid, and I know that people can be, that you're not going to top yourself, but it sometimes feels like that at 4 a.m. in the morning. And I also see around London, I am part of the so-called clubbing generation, 80s and 90s. And you see an awful lot of sad cases of people that get involved in drugs and in drinks. Now, I grew up dancing a lot. So for me, I used to club a lot as a kid and I used to dance a heck of a lot. And I used to see people who were very, very lost. And I do think it's also an increasing problem with people growing up today. We live in this world where you can have everything, you can do everything. But in some ways that freaks people out more than perhaps 50 years ago when you had your life mapped out for you. If you were a kid in the 1940s or the 50s, you didn't have all these choices. So I think it's really, really hard now. And so it was partly that, and yet that resonated with me on a deeper level because I'm a very, very tortured creative soul, she says. But I think, when you suffered from dark moods yourself, it's you kind of have a sympathy towards that side of things, and yet just how much love there is in the world. And I think that's the whole idea of Gracie. It's how all of us have inside of us the ability to almost switch it on a dime, to turn things on a dime. It's just your thought processes. Instead of going down a negative route, you can pull back and there's all magical things that happen on that journey. And then it's about realising where the love is inside of you and what you want to do with that and how that expresses itself in the world. So I think at its very heart, that's what Gracie for me was about. I wrote it very fast. When I thought I want to make a feature film, I'd seen a few really good examples. The one that really inspired me was also shot on Super 16, and it's a film called London to Brighton. And Paul Williams, the director, had also shot it on a shoestring budget. And it just really inspired me because I thought, I was on that verge, shall I make a feature? Shall I make a feature? Shall I make a feature? Shall I just jump in and go for it? And then the idea for Gracie came to me and I thought, all right, you need something if you're going to go for a low-budget film that's really easy. And Gracie has an incredibly small cast. It's basically a set of two two-handers. That's all it is. But it is a road movie. It's a growing-up movie. It's, if you like, a spiritual journey. But it's also very much a sort of an urban fantasy. It's not... It has a world and a time and a place of its own. And I think I was thinking about it the other day and talking to somebody, and they said there's a sort of a Midsummer Night's Dream quality about it, only in a dark sense. It's got that quirkiness to it. So Gracie, you could shoot it dogma style, which essentially means you're using available light. Yes, there is odd scenes that are lit, but basically for budget reasons, Super 16 was still the best choice at the time because digital, you forget, I love digital, but it's come on such a steep, fast development curve. So Super 16 had the flexibility, and we could shoot in the low lighting conditions with very little lighting. But I would definitely shoot on film again, because especially Super 16, because I'm very pleased to say that after 2 or 3 years where film was so deeply unfashionable that you could even hardly buy it in London, it has now got a resurgence, and it's found its place again, because I think at the bigger budget levels, and not that big, only 2, 3, 4 million, and you can start thinking about shooting on film. I think film has its place in the way that all the digital formats do, and I'm very pleased to see that. And people forget this, but even Super 16, it's always had 2K resolution. So, and when Super 16 in particular has a certain quality about it, it's a sort of a butteriness, that's the only way I look at it, which no other format has, like Alexa, which is a lovely format, which I shot Unify on, that I really, really love, to my way of thinking is more like 35. It has a crystal quality about it. But only Super 16 looks like Super 16. It doesn't matter how you fiddle with digital stuff in post, it still doesn't look like Super 16. There's just... So I'm so glad that has come back into fashion. And indeed, when we shot... when we were scanning Gracie's rushes out at CineLab, who were really, really cool, in Slough, they were pushing through some commercials that Nike had shot on Super 16. So Super 16 has come back into fashion, which I think it's lovely that everything has come full circle. And there are now all these different mediums that you can shoot on, everything from an iPhone to a Blackmagic to an Alexa, whatever it is you're shooting on. And film, again, has I think it was wrong that it became a dirty word for a couple of years. I think it has its place, and it's great for certain projects. So, yeah, I would definitely shoot on film again. In fact, give me half a chance, yes, I would. I'm fascinated by the sort of horror that is brought on by the horrific things human beings can do to each other, and also by really extreme emotions, sadness, heartbreak, loss. They can horrify a person in a way, and I think a lot of... This is why I like, this friend of mine's work, Taz, because you have to tap in to that deep human emotional place. So if I write horror, it tends to be in that arena. So I quite like the whole gothic idea of horror rather than slasher movies per se. I'm not really... Or the sort of thrills and spills thing. I mean, I love films like Jeepers Creepers and one-off horror. The Mist, now there's a lovely, lovely scary horror film. That's true horror, which is Frank Darabont, who did, obviously, The Shawshank Redemption. And The Mist is just... If you've ever seen it, it's very, very scary, because you think it's one kind of movie, but then right at the very end, the stinger in the tail is just like, oh, that takes it to a whole new level. And what's the one, The Cabin in the Woods? That's like that as well. That's really well-structured modern horror, which then brings up...
Malted jungle, isn't it?
It is. That just keeps going... It's like a lift that keeps going down, down, down. And then when you get right down there, it really looks at these deeper spiritual ideas and concepts. And I think for horror to be really horrifying, you have to kind of go down that road with it, definitely. I love vampire movies. I mean, Day 6 has got a very strong vampiric element to it. That's where the horror comes in with Day 6. It's got a vampire feel to it, but it's very much in a sci-fi way. So, yeah. I love all of these. They're all part of the human condition, all of them, which I think is what makes stories so interesting. It's because we all resonate. There's no point in watching a story unless you resonate to it, unless you can either identify with that person because you'd like to be them, or because they're going through something you're going through or you've been through, or they're, in a more existentialist way, they're going through something which fascinates you at the time. It's part of your learning curve as a human being, and all of us are. Whether we're learning to play cards or whatever it is we're doing, learning to meditate, there's always something, and a film will always has this amazing ability, and that's why I like films so much, this amazing ability to pull people in. It's incredibly hard to get a film off the ground in this country, and we need to think about things more in a quota-like system rather than the current system, which is where you can apply for development funding. But the whole thing is, I think it needs to be much more well thought out. We also could do with some sort of tax like they have in France, where you get a few pence on every film that comes in from another country, whether it's an American or a German film, and that levy on every cinema seat that's sold for that film goes back to that country. Therefore, they've got a good film industry in Germany and in France and in Spain. We don't here because we don't have any support for our filmmakers. What does infuriate me is people say, we've got the powers that be say we've got a great film industry. What we've got is a great tax credit system, which is wonderful once you've got the funding. What we also have is a great service industry, which services the Americans and everybody else that wants to come over here. We have amazing technicians here, really talented post houses. So they're all doing very, very well, but British independent filmmakers, you have to really sell your soul. You really have to struggle, and that it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that tough. It really shouldn't. I'm not surprised that all of our big filmmaking talent, like Matthew Vaughn, now there's somebody whose work I adore. He's gone big budget, and I don't blame him. He can do what he wants. But he's backed by the Americans, and it annoys me when people say films like The King's Speech, it's a British film. No, it isn't. It's an American film. That's the money that made it. And then all the money went back to America. So what do we get out of it? Yeah, our people in our post houses have got jobs, but our filmmakers haven't. We're all moonlighting, and that is something that I would like to change. And I don't think it's that hard to change it. I just think we need a bit of a mind shift. So yeah, there you go.
Can't argue with much of that.
No, not really.
Well, Jane Alexander Foster, it's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
And hopefully you'll come back talk about Day 6.
I will. I'd love to. Absolutely.
Or any other films you're making.
Yeah.